Let's get started. I cannot tell you how excited I am to have a friend of mine here. At least I call him my friend. I don't know whether he accepts that or not. But it is a privilege of mine to have a member of the Speakers Hall of Fame, an honor that is bestowed on less than 300 people worldwide. One of the most sought after, top rated speakers in the world. He is an accomplished author. He has written 6, now 7 books, just finished a new one, which Danny and I got a special peek at. We're going to talk to him about. He has been a national bestseller. He was named one of the top 10 motivational speakers in 2015, and there were well over 9,000 candidates for that. So this dude is no joke, just so you know that. Was named Author of the Year for his book, Enjoy the Ride. He has influenced millions through his presentations, his books, and his videos. Most of you that know me know the video series, Motivational Bites. I actually just adore that entire video series. We've been sharing those with you for the last couple of years through our newsletter that we send out. He's been gracious enough to allow us to share those with you. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Hall of Fame speaker, best-selling author, and whether he will admit it or not, my friend, Steve Gilliland. Steve, my friend, thank you, buddy, for being here. I appreciate it.
You're welcome, and I will admit being your friend.
Well, we got you hostage in here, so you know. So, listen, I don't care if you're my friend or not. I care that you have absolutely treated yourself more than my friend. You know, I tell people there are people in this world you just kind of connect with. You know, your hearts just connect, and you're one of those guys. I know you've heard this story 100 times, but I have to tell it how we met. A good friend of yours, Chuck Gallagher, was a speaker for our small business event the year before. So the next year came, and I was looking for a new speaker. I couldn't have Chuck speak twice, and I asked Chuck if he knew somebody else, and he said, "I'm sure my buddy Steve will do it." And I said, "Oh, that'll be great. Thank you so much. I appreciate that." And he gave me your email address, and I sent you an email, and I think we spoke on the phone and said, "Hey, here's the date. Here's when it's going to happen. Here's what's going to happen." And you called me and you said, "Excuse me, I'm sorry. Do we know each other?" No, we don't know each other, but your friend said you'd do this for me, and I appreciate it. Who said I would speak for you? Chuck said that I would speak for you. Yep, he sure did. Now, you understand, sir, you're not going to get paid anything for this, but we appreciate you doing this. And you said, okay, if Chuck said it, I'll do it. And and you end up speaking for us. I had no idea who Chuck was hooking me up with and how special that was, my friend. And ever since then, when I call and ask you to do me a favor, buddy, you're there and you do it. You are a genuine man as anybody I have ever met. And thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. Matter of fact, even this interview is a special treat because the minute I heard you had just completed your latest book, I said, "Can I get you on the radio? Can I get you on the radio?" And you said, "Yeah, okay, all right, I'll show up and come by." So thank you, buddy. I really do appreciate it.
You're welcome. I tell you what, as a matter of fact, that book, when you asked me, the copy that you read was a pre-proofed, manuscript.
Right.
So it when I say hot
Raw.
off the press, it was hot off of a computer. It was not hot, but I thought it'll give you enough to go on, and hopefully there wasn't that many changes when the editors and proofers went through it.
Right.
But so
and we're going to talk about it in a minute. But let's talk a little bit about Steve, because when I say you're a genuine man, I do mean. When you read Steve's books, you really do understand the man, and he tries very hard to live an intentional life, and he tries to help you do that as well. Where does that come from? Because in this book that we're going to get ready to talk about, I noticed there was a life change for you around 39. I didn't know that about you, right? Talk a little bit about that, because it does seem like that seemed to be a life-changing time period for you.
Well, it harkens me to bring up my mom, who passed away in 2021. And when I go backwards, it always starts with her, because she was a person that said, she always taught me, surround yourself with a character of people that resembles who you want to be. And I had always had friends that I, felt were high character, just good people. You get married, you have children, you think your life is going to be, you're going to have that house and, the
Right.
old picket fence, and you're going to have, a couple of animals,
Yep,
and
yep.
you're just going to grow up and, live happily ever after. It's that whole Disney story. And at age 39, I woke up one morning and realized that, and I say this, I take ownership to this. You realize that you took some things for granted, and those things that you took for granted, all of a sudden you wake up and they're not there. One of those being, that marriage that I thought would be forever. I didn't take it well, and what I mean by that is, emotionally, I thought that was the end. Financially, I was in a tough spot, and emotionally, I was in an even tougher spot.
Right. So let's go back a little bit, right? Because I remember you telling a story at one of your live speeches, and I probably, Danny, heard him speak 4 or 5 times, and I'm telling you, I look forward to sitting down, getting comfortable, because nobody tells a story better than Steve. It's just exceptional, right? I remember you telling a story of how you had just gotten your first job as CEO of a large corporation. How did you go from that, right? And you can share some of that story if you like, to being a top speaker? Because it's like 2 different scenarios.
Well, again, you climb out of a hole, and I had started to, dig out of that hole and, stop feeling sorry for myself. And, I'm going to use the word again. I took ownership of where I was at in my life. And at that particular point in time, I was a person, and I was always no nonsense. I was always very realistic. I was always, I don't have perfect kids, and I would meet people and say, if your children are perfect, congratulations. Mine aren't. And I think that's how I lived my life, that things just, here's the real world. There's no acronym. I would tell people, if you want to be a great leader, there is no L stands for this, E stands for this, A stands for that.
Right.
I mean, it was like, here are the attributes, here are the characteristics, here's the hard work. I used to use the word heavy lifting. So once I put that in play, and I started to climb the corporate ladder, once I got promoted, I was very blessed to be assigned a secretary. And again, that secretary would be somebody that would absolutely, unequivocally impact my life in such a way that when she passed away, Joe, and I'll say this to Danny too, when she passed away, over 800 people attended the funeral for a woman who never had a business card or a door shut to her office.
Wow.
This was a woman who impacted people every day of her life. Changed my view. John Maxwell said in one of his books, if I can change the way you think, I'll change your world forever. And that is exactly what this person did for me. And she was the one that challenged me. And you mentioned enjoy the ride in your introduction. She was the one that challenged me one day when she said, if every job in the world paid the same. She said, if it all paid the same. Now remember, I'm making at this time, I've climbed out of that hole.
Right.
I'm making great money. The world, I've got everything that I want. But she said, if it all paid the same, what would you wake up and do for the rest of your life? And I didn't understand the question until she said, and we'll use it here, marketing,
Right.
radio host, business, school teacher, policeman. She said, if everything paid the same, what would you wake up and do for the rest of your life?
What a great question.
And I thought about it for a couple of days, and quite frankly, it was like I knew what I wanted to do. And that is exactly how I ended up resigning my position. In the book, Enjoy the Ride, which you alluded to already, I talked about her in the first chapter where I said, I called it my $2 question. And you don't know how many times I have looked, and I'll tell you a group of people, I will look at a sector of, the world we live in terms of a career. You look at a school teacher and you say, if every job in the world paid the same, would you wake up and be doing this? Because I challenge people to think, if you wouldn't, go do something else. Because, for example, in the world of education, there's not enough passion and purpose.
Right.
If you're not going to wake up and that would be your career move. Because there are certain things that aren't careers. There are certain things that are callings. There's jobs, there's callings, and there's careers. And so that's where I kind of was headed. I was in a career, and then I was on my way to a calling, thanks to a secretary.
So how do you come up with the topics of, I know where you come up with the stories. It's your life stories, right? And again, I encourage people to go to those motivational bites because some of those stories that you tell are just absolutely phenomenal. I mean, tears in my eyes, literally, as you're telling some of those, just like phenomenal. How do you come up with the topics that you want to talk about? Because you have thousands of people that are listening and hundreds of dates on your calendar. How do you come up with that?
Well, the biggest thing is you take real life and you ask yourself this: have you ever been around a person that lives in a really nice home, drives a really nice car, has all the things they think they want, and yet they're not happy?
Let's take a break and we'll come back. You are listening to the Speakers Hall of Fame that has been bestowed on less than 300 people worldwide. He is the most sought after and top rated speaker in the world. He is an accomplished author, and we're going to talk about his brand new book in a moment. Steve, thank you for being here, buddy. I do appreciate it.
Absolutely.
So I cut you off at the last minute. I apologize. You know, I have an amateur board operator. You understand that today. So I'm doing the best that I can. But please finish your thought, because you were talking about how all of this sort of that life influenced you.
Well, the influences you were saying about topics, and I was saying about, you know, you meet people that live in beautiful homes, have great jobs, make lots of money, and then you ask yourself, are they happy? And the topic, Enjoy the Ride, was a result of me meeting a gentleman who challenged me. And he actually said this to me. He said, you know, his wife had passed away probably 31 years prior to the conversation I was having with him. And he said, do you know how many times at dinner I sat with my wife and 3 daughters who were all raised, lived 3,000 miles from here, and always on my mind was what I had to do after dinner. He said, literally, I would give anything to have one more dinner with those children and that wife, and we all do it. We act like, you know, we're going to get a repeat here. So that's where Enjoy the Ride. So the titles that I pick and the topics are relevant to people. It's kind of like I tell young people. You know, I'll look at somebody, and I don't even know how old Danny is, but I'll look at somebody and say, listen, they're 6 one day, you blink and they're 16, you turn around and they're 26, and you're trying to figure out how to get them all together on a vacation.
Right.
That's how it all comes about. You know, and I don't know if people that are watching on Facebook and can see the show, but the story about Margaret is about our cat, which is, Margaret was my secretary. We named our cat after my secretary.
Right.
But that story there is relevant. So when children are read that book by their parents, again, it teaches a life lesson about belonging. So everything is relevant to, we live in a real world. Life picks on everyone. Don't take it personal. Just know that it's going to be the way you react to those situations.
And I want people listening to know this. One of the things Steve Gillialand does so well in his books, he does talk about, and you know, I read a book that Oprah Winfrey had written with some other bigwig, smart-headed dude about how to be happy, right? And the concept of the entire book was purpose. But the problem was, after the 400 pages, they never told me how to find purpose. When I read Steve's books, you're giving me these nuggets of how to, and that's the difference, which is why I really appreciate your book and your writing so much. You really kind of touch on not just what the issue is, purpose, but let me tell you how I get there, which is why I really like that so much.
I appreciate that. And I had a publisher that came to me and one time said, if you want to be successful writing a book, remember the paint by numbers, where you had to, you know, and again, some of the youngsters out there may not, but back in the day that was very popular. There was numbers and it told you what color of paint to use. Make sure you write the book so it's paint by numbers. So by the time it's finished, people will understand and have learned something, and make sure they want to give it and share it with someone else. Like, for example, if they read it, they give it to their sister and say, listen, you need to read this. Or they give it to a neighbor and say, hey, you really ought to read this. It's
funny you say that, because I finished this and I immediately, as quick as I could last night, because I knew we were going to be here, sent it to Danny and sent it to Julie, because I wanted them to see that as well. And which now brings me to the special part of the show. We get to talk about your brand new book that nobody else has seen. You understand that, Danny? That's how special which, by the way, you're going to have to burn it, because it has not been edited yet. You understand that, don't you?
Oh, I love it. Hey, being part of the media has its perks, right? This is
That's
about
right.
the first advanced copy I've ever gotten, so
That's
I like
right.
it.
We do have an advance copy, so I get that, Steve, that we might be talking about something that you might decide to clean up later with the book. But the book is titled, "It Is What You Make It: Overcoming the It Is What It Is mindset." And it's such as soon as I saw this, I cannot tell you how many times I've heard the Panthers' old quarterback say it is what it is, and it used to rub me. I couldn't tell you why it rubbed me. It just rubbed me, right? Like, he made it sound like there's nothing we can do about it, but you're a coach. Aren't you supposed to do something about it? So when I heard that, I thought, oh, I'm really going to get my answer now, right? What that was. And in fact, you do answer it. What made you want to use this topic?
Pretty much, Joe, what you just said. That there were so many times and instances where somebody would say, well, it is what it is. And I would go, no, it's not. No, it's not. But the biggest breakthrough in terms of where I got it was as we entered COVID, it became a prevalent people would say, well, it is what it is. I mean, you got to accept it. It is what it is. And I kept saying, no, it is what we make it. And it's going to be what we make it, because we're going to come out of this. And on the other side of it, whoever has made it and carved out a narrative that doesn't fit what we were being told is going to be further along. So for me, again, and some of the listeners out there probably know, first comes COVID in March of 2020. And for me, stage 3 cancer comes in May of 2020. And that's where it was basically me saying, no, it is what you make it. My mom said, I'll never forget when she found out that I was diagnosed with cancer in the midst of COVID. My wife couldn't even go to the hospital.
Right.
My wife literally said, call your mom. When I call my mother, here's what she says. She said, the mess you're in is going to be your brand new message. The test you think you're going through, brand new testimony. And she said, for the first time in your life, you are going to now live the books you've written.
Wow.
You're going to live them. And so for me, it was a real eye-opener. So when I wrote this book, I wanted people to understand, just as you alluded to the Panthers quarterback, no, it is what you make it. Circumstances may not, things come at you pretty fast, but here's the situation. You've got to look at it, and it's the way you're going to react to that situation. Randy Posh, Joe, who wrote, when he wrote his book, The Last Lecture, one of the things that he said was, you don't know the value of 30 minutes. And there was a situation I don't want to go into, but he said, you don't know the value of 30 minutes until you have 3 months left to live.
Interesting.
And it's all that. He didn't accept it. He said, it is what I make it. And I'm going to make these last months of my life count and matter for something. And he did. He absolutely impacted a lot of people.
And the very first statement that you make in the book is, nothing happens to you, it happens for you. So you're already prepping me, you know what I mean, get my mind right before I even get to the first chapter, right? And I really like that. It kind of opened my mind to, okay, I'm already preparing for what this book is going to be all about. And so I went through the book, and I marked up just a few areas that I kind of want you to get your thoughts on that just intrigued me, right? One of them is a statement, either you run the day or the day runs you. You choose. And I'll tell you something, that is such a business person statement, right? Because if you're not careful, other things will control that day. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, one of the things about running your day is when you wake up in the morning, the first thing you do is you ask yourself, what is it that's important to do to start that day? This is a guy that doesn't, and I know I'm on news talk radio, but I'm not a person that dives into social media. I'm not a person that dives into a lot of things, because I've said to people, all of a sudden you read something, you're going to react to it. All of a sudden you're in a really good mood on the way to work, and somebody posts something or somebody says something, and you can't even let it go. You are
Right.
so fixated on it that by the time you get to work, by the time, let's talk small business. By the time you get there, walk through those doors, and you're trying to get ready for something, you're not even mentally there.
Yeah. Or, for small business folks like myself, email, right? If the first thing I do is open my email in the morning, it's like, I'm giving up control of my day right then and there. So my question for you is, what do you do instead? If you don't wake up and start checking those things, how do you start your day?
Well, I'm faith-based, so the very first thing I'm doing is, I'm going to spend a little bit of time having little devotions. I read. That's one of the things that I do. I read. I'm a carnivorous reader of other people's books, and I'm a nonfiction guy. So I'll read out of a book. I read out of my Bible. I pray. I spend time getting my mind where I believe it needs to be so that I'm ready for when those things happen. And I think that's the thing is I kind of feel the late Zig Ziglar used to say, garbage goes in, it must exit out.
Yep,
so I make sure I put the right stuff in.
Let's go. We come back. I want to dig into the statement in chapter 2. Change your narrative. We get back. You're listening to Local Biz Now. Say it, Danny. Say it.
Your business matters.
Yeah, we'll be right back. Talking to my good friend, whether I have to buy him or not, Steve Gillialand. He is the Hall of Fame speaker, also the top accomplished author and top 10 motivational speaker, and somebody that we just think a lot of here at Local Biz Now and WSIC. And most of you have heard his name before. Number one, because we try and promote him as much as we can on our newsletter and our email, but also he has done at least 3 or 4 small business events for us in the area. Every time I ask you to help us out in the community, you're right there to do that, buddy. So thank you so much for that.
You're welcome. Yeah.
So a cigar and scotch is not a problem, man. I'm way ahead.
I'm a big believer in giving back. So.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I see that in your actions. So thank you so much. So let's get back to your book. So one of the things I really like about the writing that you do is that you give us these details, right? And one of them is change the narrative. And you've got this section where you literally have a chart that says, don't say this, say, you tell us exactly what to say. So for example, you say, one of them is, I can't do this. And you say, how about if you say, I'm still learning and I'll keep trying. And you've got a list of these that goes through those. Where did you come up with those? Is that a sort of a family thing that you picked up on? Because when I read some of these, I got to tell you, it's not like it isn't a common alternative phrase.
Well, I picked up on it because basically when I was younger, coming up through playing sports, had some great coaches who taught, just kind of taught that mindset. And again, that's, as you start this book, it is what you make it.
Right.
It's about the mindset, and it is about those things. There's a saying, Joe, that says those people that say it can't be done get their paycheck signed by those that say it can be done.
Right.
And there have been those things in my life where somebody said, well, I don't necessarily think you can. And the minute you say you think I can't, that's when I try to find a way to.
Yes.
That was basically the premise of the book. When you introduced this, you said, overcoming the is what it is mindset. If you have the is what it is mindset, you have an acceptance. You basically are saying, well, I don't think I can. My personality is, let's do it, And again, Einstein, not me. Einstein was one that always said, try, try. What's the worst thing that can happen?
Right.
You fail, but then you figure out a way from the failure how to maybe do it and correct a situation. So that narrative that sometimes is given to us, and I think that's the thing of, I wrote a piece you said about topics. I wrote something called, what to say when you talk to yourself. And when we talk to ourselves, we're repeating things that we've been told. How many times you told no before you're 6 years old?
Yep.
How many times you told no, you can't, no, you can't, no, it's no, you can't. Well, with me, it's yes, you can.
Well, it's funny you say that because that's the next thing that I marked in the book, which is your phrase, the voice you listen to determine your internal story, change your negative thoughts, and create space and that's the part I like, create space for new ones that support and uplift you. And so that's really what you're describing there, right? So let me ask you this, and I was taught that by Chris Villani. Chris helped me lose a bunch of weight, had me look in the mirror and say something, to myself, right, which at the time sounds stupid, right? But that's essentially what he's saying here. So my question to you is, how do you do that? How do you take those negative thoughts and change them and turn them into something positive?
Well, you surround yourself, as my mother said earlier, you surround yourself with the right people and you take in the right information. Because, Joe, thoughts are produced by people and information. So you think about the people you surround yourself with and what they tell you. Think about the things that you read and what it is you're reading. Those produce your thoughts. Those thoughts produce your actions, and your actions produce your habits. If you really think about it, those habits then form character. Character, that's life path, wherever you end up. So how you do it is you begin with who you hanging out with, what are you guys talking about, and what are you taking in? What information are you taking in? So I'm very careful to make sure that I get around. You said about, I hope I can call you a friend. I call you a friend because you're a very positive person.
Yeah.
You influence people in a very positive way. First time I met Julie, I mean, this lady's an angel. I mean, she just kind of,
Everybody needs a Julie.
Yeah. Everybody does need a Julie. And I think that's the thing that you end up trying to do. But in life, so many times we are, infiltrated by the negative. You just kind of weed it out.
Yeah. So, Steve, one section of the book that I love that jumped out at me was there's a section on managing setbacks. And, thinking about business owners, right? We all deal with setbacks. And I like that you kind of had a chart, right? Of it was like processing it. It was like first you go through denial, then paralysis, and then there's a healing point. You would like
his charts.
Yeah. and then there's a comeback. And I just thought that was really cool. You're not just saying, suck it up and get over it, but there's this kind of process that you talked about. Can you talk about that for a second?
Well, and again, everybody talks about goals, but it is so true when you finally get to that bottom. The old saying. And when I did that chart, it goes top left down to bottom, starts with denial, and then it starts its way back up. But on the start up, as you're starting to climb back up, it's the incremental goal. It's kind of like writing a book. People say to me, how do you write a book? It's like, well, you set a goal, and you set the goal based on how much you're going to write every day, how much you're going to write every week. What's the deadline? When do you want to have the book? So as you're starting that climb up, but there's the most important part of that climb, Danny, is work hard. I just believe in the world we live in today, everything is fast, quick. No, you work hard. And you sweat the small stuff, which is another chapter in the book. I know there's a great best-selling book out there, Don't Sweat the Small Stuff. But in my book, I tell you, sweat the small stuff. And sweating the small stuff is that working hard. It's that, you're only going to have to work 12. Here's my thing. I tell people, you're only going to have to work. I only work half days. You just have to choose which 12 hours you're going to work.
That's right.
So that's the, and I think that's the middle rung. If I remember correctly, work hard is the middle rung. But as you're going up through that process, that's the one that I stop on. It's kind of like, you have got to do the heavy lifting. And in business, you're going to have setbacks. You're going to have setbacks, but it's okay.
But I love when you talk about sweat the small stuff and you're trying to give us details, because that is what every business is about. I started off the restaurant business. I mean, do you understand how much time I spent deciding what the size of the salt and pepper shaker should be so they're easy to clean or not, or where how do you fill them up? These details matter for years because someone's going to spend the time doing those things. Those small details are what makes success. And you hand that to people in this book by saying, listen, these things really do matter.
Differentiate yourself in this community we live in the communities that both of you serve. Differentiate yourself. Do those things that nobody else is doing. And sometimes you have to think way outside and go, what is it that I could do? Maybe serve in a way. I serve when I check into a hotel for a client. If I check in after 10 p.m., I have a card that's made up that says, look who just arrived. It's a picture of me. It's my name, all the information. I give the bell staff $10 and I go to the front desk. I said, this is a person who hired me to be here. Are they in the hotel? They said, yes. I said, you don't need to tell me the room number. You need to take this, $10, slide this under their door so that when they wake up in the morning, they went to bed wondering, is there an opening speaker there?
That's right.
They wake up on the way to the bathroom, they look at it and they smile and go, it is a small thing, but it is a detail that differentiates you from other people. And I think that's the thing, Danny, when you're the expert, the marketing, sometimes it's just a little thing, but that's part of that comeback as well. Sometimes you never used Facebook, you never used social media, you never used this. And then all of a sudden you say, you know what? Part of the comeback needs to be, I need to incrementally set a goal to do a little bit of this. I'm going to put my foot in the water. You know what? I've tapped my toes. Now it's time to put my foot in the water. But sometimes people don't do that. It goes back to changing the narrative. You just do it differently. And stop listening to the noise.
I need another hour and a half for Steve. We're only at chapter 2. You understand that, don't you? I haven't even begun to tell you. I got to get you back on the show once you got the official book, because I'm going to want you to sign mine anyways. You understand? But one more thing on chapter 2: people have the right to their opinions, and you have the right to ignore it. And right after that, you say, unsolicited advice is usually more about the giver's need than the receivers. I love those two statements because it really does say this is how you keep control of positive.
Shut out the noise.
Yeah.
So much noise out there.
So, Steve, we just don't have any time for this, buddy. Like I said, for you listeners, we've only got to chapter 2. There is an entire book for you to get to. Thank you so much for coming here. But is there any last statement you want to? We don't even have that.
I'll be back.
Steve Gillialand, we'll get him back again. Thank you.
Serving you better than ever before. WSIC, Statesville, W290DK Mooresville, W264CU State.